Hello everybody, greetings from Spain. My name is Pablo Dura and I am the writer of the Lincoln Brigade graphic novel. First of all, some housekeeping. I would like to thank, big thank you to your teacher, Mr. Smith, for reaching out to me and for asking you to read the book. I hope you enjoyed it, and of course a big thank you to you for taking the time to read it. I hope, as I said, I hope you enjoyed it, and I hope you were able to learn from it and the big impact the international brigades and the volunteers who came from over the world, specifically from the US, the big part they played in the Spanish Civil War. This book took several years in the making, and is something that we are really proud of, the work we put into it, and yeah, I hope you enjoyed it. This book is basically a big thank you note and a tribute to those volunteers who came, like I said, from all over the world. Sadly, we cannot put all of them into the book because otherwise it would be a very long comic book. But in Spain, we had volunteers coming from over the world, and I would like to stress the word volunteers, because none of them were recruited. They just came on their own accounts because they thought they were fighting, the good fight. They were fighting for what was right. I always say that citizens of Spain in favor of a democratic state have a great deal of gratitude to all those volunteers. The Lincoln Brigade is actually a misnomer. The correct name would probably be the Lincoln Battalion, because a brigade is a group of battalions. So for the amount of soldiers that went in it, it would be more correct to say battalion. But it's one of those things that we've ended up calling the thing the brand. If people refer to vacuum cleaners as Hoovers, even though the Hoover was the brand of the item, or back in the 90s people would call any game console, they would call it Nintendo, even though there were different brands. Now I would like to answer some of the questions that you kindly sent me. Unfortunately, I'm not going to be able to cover them all, but most of them, apologies in advance if I didn't answer your questions. But I didn't want to make the video too long. But like I said, if you have any questions whatsoever about the book, creative process, script, anything at all regarding the Lincoln Brigade, the comic book itself, or whatever, feel free to reach me in Twitter. My DMs are always open, or just tweet me. I'll put the my profile, so you can reach me anytime. I'll be more than happy to answer your questions. First, before I start, I would like to establish the timeline for the Spanish Civil War. That way, I think it will make things a bit clearer when I answer some of your questions. In 1931, April 1931, the Second Republic was the proclamation of the Second Republic. We call it the Second Republic because there was a previous one, obviously. We're not going to go into it. Just we stay with the Second Republic. It was voted, and then it's just been its 91st anniversary. And then in 1936, 5 years later, there was the coup d'etat by Franco and his generals. They tried to take over. It failed. They couldn't do it, and then that's what kickstarted the Spanish Civil War. It lasted started in 1936, and it lasted until 1939, and then the Republic lost, and Spain was under Franco's dictatorship until 1975, when he died. And after that, from 1976 until 1978, there was like a transition period. In 1978, the new constitution was voted, and the democratic system we have in place now is a constitutional monarchy, very similar to what Great Britain has. We have a king, but we have a prime minister as well. So let's go with the questions. Again, apologies if I'm not able to answer all of them. Let's go with the first one. Why did the author choose to make Oliver the main character? Well, I think if it had been a white protagonist, it would have been a very different book, simply because he would not have had the same experiences as a black protagonist. Someone in the comments pointed out some things haven't really changed that much in the US since the 1930s, sadly. So if I had put a white character, it would have been a different book altogether. When I found out, I mean, the volunteers from the Lincoln Brigade, not just soldiers, all the volunteers who came over from the US, there were about 2,800, and not all of them had a rifle to fight. Some of them were, nurses, doctors, anything. They would just help with anything they could. Out of those 2,800, 80 of them were African Americans, and they were shocked to find out that so many African Americans came over to Spain, because let's remember, they came over to protect some liberties, some freedoms that they didn't even enjoy themselves back home in the US. So that really shocked me. And the fact that, Oliver, a black man, was able to command the Lincoln Brigade at some point, that shocked me completely. I thought, if I don't put this guy as the main protagonist, it would have been a really let down for myself. So yeah, that's what I wanted to tell his story. Next question: why did the comics have such drastic and swift tonal shifts? I don't know if you mean the humor sometimes. At heart, I'm a very positive person. I love humor, and if you make a dramatic book very dramatic, in the end, people just switch off. You need those changes, those shifts in the tone to keep people's attention. If you just have death, misery, sadness all the time continuously, it would just leave you drained, and you would just stop paying attention. So yeah, that's why I put some humor in it. And because, like, for example, when they when they go to the boot camp and they are training, that's not that I didn't make that up. That really did happen. They would train with rocks and with sticks instead of real rifles, and they would just like go bang bang because they didn't want to waste bullets on the training. So that probably could explain one of the things that the soldiers on the Republic Army were not very well prepared. Right, next question. You said you had an opportunity to meet some of the people who fought in Spain. How did you feel to talk to them? What about the story shocked you or stood out the most? Sadly, I never had a chance to meet any International Brigade volunteers. By the time I got interested in telling the story, the vast majority of them had passed on, were dead, and so I couldn't talk to them. I did speak to their families, and I'll get to that in a minute. My grandfather did fight in the Spanish Civil War, but sadly he passed away when I was a teenager, and he never spoke about the war. And this is something I will get to later as well, because the problem with the war in Spain is that for more than 40 years, people could not protest or tell their story for out of fear of reprisal or getting reported to the authorities by a fascist neighbor or by police or whatever. You could get, punished really, really hard in Spain for protesting the dictatorship. All the research I've made have been through textbooks, essays, and the internet, but that leaves you, you're only getting part of the story. Unless you go to the source, you're only getting part of the story. You're missing the human element, and that is achieved by contacting the sources, the people. But like I said, all of them had passed on. So thankfully, I got contacted by the families. Josephine Nelson, who wrote the introduction to the book. You probably noticed that it has a different. It is the same book, but it has a different cover. This is the copy you read is the copy we printed for the crowdfunding campaign. The book was funded by using Kickstarter, but this is the published edition in Spain. If you were to buy it, this is what you would buy in the US. Is in color, the one you read, and it has just been announced that either next month or the month after that is going to get published in black and white. It would be a bit cheaper. I don't know how it would look like in black and white because I'm so used to the color, but yeah. So, like I said, Josephine Nelson, the daughter of Steve Nelson, reached out to me, and she was able to answer some of my questions about her dad, and she confirmed some suspicions I had. For example, I didn't know if Steve Nelson and Oliver Lowe were friends. I suspected it would be because they lived in the same city and they were both fighting in the war. So I assumed they would be friends, and she was not only she did not only confirm they were friends. She said they were really good friends. So that helped me a lot. And also another person that contacted me was a man called Luke Gordon. He's the son of Louis Gordon, another veteran, and Louis Gordon made a lecture at the Johns Hopkins University, so right around your neck of the woods. And in this lecture, he tells lots of stories about the Spanish Civil War. He's not in the book because he fought in a different front in the Spanish Civil War. So, I cannot tell everybody's stories, otherwise it would be too long. But Mr. Gordon's story is also very interesting. And actually, out of that lecture, I took some of his stories, like for some of the uniform things that the uniforms didn't fit at all and things like that. The humor, the way he tells stories with lots of humor, despite the sadness of the story of the war and everything. But he's able to put some humor into it. I'll put a link below. I hope you will like it. I'll put the links on the description. I think probably that'll be easier. Also, I put a link to a fragment of a documentary, an amazing documentary, probably the best you could ever watch about the Lincoln Brigade. It's called The Good Fight. Is a documentary shot in the very early 80s. I think it was 81, 82, and it interviews many volunteers. Some of them are in the book, and it's an amazing piece of document interviews and everything, because even though the volunteers are, you see them, they're quite old, but they are very lucid and they're able to tell their stories very clearly, and it's just an amazing piece of historic document, because they're able to tell their story firsthand. You get a sense of their personalities, their feelings, and they tell you everything you need to know about how everything was boiling over in the States, that rising of fascism in the world, basically, not just in Europe but also in America, and it's just an amazing piece. I put a link to it on the description to a fragment. Sadly, the documentary is not in full on YouTube. There's only fragments of it. So Tim, if you're able to purchase it in DVD or whatever over there, it's not available in Spain, but if you're able to purchase it for the school, do it, man, because it's just an amazing piece of document. Next question. Did Harry's journal ever get published? This is one thing that some authors do. The diary thing is just something I made up. I don't know if he had a diary. Maybe he did, maybe he didn't. I don't know. It's very because many people wrote diaries at the time. He could have had a diary, but I don't know. The character of Harry Hackham, he was a real volunteer. He came to Spain, and he at one point I read a post on Facebook of somebody, a lady who claimed she was the daughter of Harry Hackham. I couldn't confirm that because even though I tried to reach out to her, she never replied any of my emails, any of my messages. She claims that Oliver Law, probably at Mosquito Ridge, where Oliver Law died, she claims that Oliver saved her dad. So I couldn't confirm that. I don't know if that happened for real, but it's a very cool story. Something I did for the book is I followed Alan Moore's advice. If you don't know who Alan Moore is, he's probably the greatest comic book writer had ever lived. He wrote some amazing comic books, Watchmen, V for Vendetta, just to name two of them, but he's got many comic books written, and they're all excellent. So I encourage you to find some of his books and read them. I think you'll like them. So something Alan Moore says is that when he wrote a comic book called From Hell, which tells the story of Jack the Ripper, he basically followed this rule. He tells the story of things that happen, and he knows for certain they happen because history book says they happen, chronists, eyewitnesses, newspapers. So you have that part of the story that are 100% fact. Then you have all the things, all the elements that you're not 100%, but you're almost certain they happen that way because of the things that surround those elements. So you're not 100%, but you're most certainly but you cannot confirm the 100%, but you're almost certain they happen that way. And then you have the third thing, which is things that are made up, things that you don't know they happened, but because of the context of the story, they could have happened. So this is the approach I took when writing the story. Next question. How were you first introduced to this event? What made you want to write about it? If you're from Spain, it is impossible not to be touched in some way or shape or form by the events of the Spanish Civil War. Like I said, my grandfather fought in the war but never spoke about it. Is something that I'll get to on in a minute. Next question. What is the Spanish government like today? How is the Civil War taught about in schools today? The US Civil War is taught in different ways throughout the US, and we are still struggling with its impact. This is such a very good question because it affects us deeply. For example, let me get some light. Sadly, I spoke that, when Franco died, there was a 2-year transition when basically the country went from a dictatorship to that constitutional monarchy. But what happened was when Franco died in 1975, all the fascists who supported Franco, they didn't vanish. They were still there. They had infiltrated. They not infiltrated. They were at every stratum of society, from government to lower classes. They were everywhere. They did not just vanish. So nowadays, even though we are in a democratic state, you still get those fascists over there, hidden in the shadows in democratic parties. Like there's a party here called the Popular Party, which is basically is a right-wing party, and in it there are some descendants, sons, daughters of those very same fascists. Obviously, they don't say they're fascist anymore, even though some of the things they say and some of the things they do are a bit fascist. And in the recent years, there's another party. It's not like in the States where you basically have two main parties. In Spain, we have like 5 or 6 main parties, national level. Then you have like local parties for like city halls, councils, things like that. But I don't want to bore you with the details. But in the recent years, there's the raising of another party called Vox, VOX, and they are extreme right party. Those are real fascists. They're not hiding away. they wear that badge with pride. But nowadays, the topic of the Spanish Civil War is being very sensitive, because when on that transition period, what people wanted was fascists wanted to forgive and forget. The argument was, the Civil War is in the past. Let's all forget about it. Let's look into the future. Let's move forward, which is all very nice and everything. But the problem is that if you don't heal those scars, they will never, if you don't heal those scars, they will never get better. And that's what happened. They've mismanaged, the after effects of that dictatorship in a very bad way. I don't know if you know about this, but Spain is the second largest mass graveyard in the world, right after Cambodia. During the Spanish Civil War and after the Spanish Civil War, the fascists killed many thousands and thousands of people, and they are all buried in mass graves, and some their families don't know where they are, and it's very sad because the governments from 1978 until now, they've never done anything. They never got associations never got funded from the government to search those relatives. All their funding has been private, and it's been very difficult to uncover those mass graves. So fascists always say, let's forgive and forget, because they knew in a democratic state they would not have a legal leg to stand on if the families of those punished by the dictatorship, started suing them for damages. We're still dealing with that. So, going back to your question, the Spanish Civil War has been a very touchy topic in education. It was covered very lightly in school. Myself, it was something that it was covered very lightly, tiptoeing around it. They didn't want to talk about it. They would basically go from World War One to World War Two and sort of tiptoeing in the middle about the Spanish Civil War. Things are changing. A friend of mine is a history teacher in high school, and I know he covers it deeply. In fact, he invites me every year to do some lectures about the Spanish Civil War and the Lincoln Brigade. So things are changing. Next question: how long did it take to make the book? The answer is too long. When I first read about the Lincoln Brigade, I think it was around 2005, 2006, and the book was published in 2018. So it's way too long. Don't do it. If you want to, if you have any interest in the arts, whether it's write, music, theater, anything at all, don't wait. Just sit down, put your butt on the seat, and do it. Don't wait that long, otherwise you will regret it. Next question. Why does it say Brooks was here on the wall of the prison? this was a joke by the artist Carles. That is something that is, if you haven't seen it, I encourage you to watch this film. It's called The Shawshank Redemption. It's something that one of the prisoners carves in a wall. So he loves that movie and he puts it there. He put it there. So, but it's a great movie, nevertheless. If you haven't seen it, go watch it. You will enjoy it. How have people reacted to reading this book? I think the overall feedback has been very positive. People liked the book. It's not a bestseller by any means, but people have liked it, and we're very happy with the results. And is sort of what they call is an evergreen book. Basically, you could read it yesterday, today, or in 10 years' time. The Spanish Civil War is still a hot topic, so I think people will still buy it and read it hopefully. Next question. Why didn't Franco return the favor and fight alongside the Germans and Italians in World War II? Franco was a fascist, but he was not stupid. And first of all, the country, Spain, was in shambles. The country was destroyed. It was a mess. And he didn't have enough resources to fight, to send troops and fight full on scale, because he knew he would lose. And at the time, it didn't look very good for the fascists and the Nazis. So even though he did send some troops, they were called the Blue Division. He did send some troops just to save face, but he couldn't, go full on. Otherwise, he would lose. And at the time, from the time that the Civil War ended, he showed himself to the world as an anti-communist, not as a fascist, but he said, no, I'm not a fascist, I'm an anti-communist. And that this is something that this speech, it was something that really appealed to the Americans. The Cold War was about to start, and this is something that really appealed to Americans, and it was a way for the Americans to stay out of his way. In fact, when the World War II ended and the fascists lost and the Nazis lost, all those Republicans, when I say Republicans, I mean people in favor of the Republic of Spain, who were still alive and had escaped, they were very uplifted, because they thought those tanks, before going back home, they would take a small detour in Spain and kick Franco in the butt and kick him out. But that didn't happen, because he was already portraying himself as an anti-communist. The alliance between the USSR and the US was only temporary because of the Nazis. Like I said, the Cold War was about to start, and Spain and Franco wanted to be on the good side of the Americans. So, next question. Why did the author choose to tell this story in a comic format? The answer is simple. I don't know how to tell stories in any other way. I love comic books. I've always loved comic books. And this is something I'm really passionate about. And yeah, I cannot write a novel. I cannot make a movie. But I can write a comic book. Why did your grandfather never talk about it? This is a very good question. Thank you. There's been there's more generations after me, but I'm that generation that basically I had my grandfather, my dad, and myself. My grandfather couldn't talk about the war because out of fear of being punished. My dad didn't talk about it because his dad didn't talk about it, so he felt he couldn't talk about it either. So I'm the first generation who's not only able to talk about it, but also has to. The two generations before me have had a forced amnesia, and I'm the generation who needed to tell that story, to tell their story, to denounce those crimes. And so this is something that, once my grandfather, even though in a democratic state, he hadn't spoken about the war for so many years, and about the dictatorship, he just didn't feel the need to anymore. But I'm of that generation who has to talk about it. Why do you think this event is often overlooked in history books, classrooms in Spain? Because it's still a very hot topic, it's a very touchy topic, because even though it's been, like almost 90 years since the war, is still, a very touchy topic. People just tiptoe around it, and fascists have found a way to, say that the people in favor of the Republic were just as bad as the fascists, which is untrue. How has your life been impacted by this event? Does it still matter? It still matters because, like I said, fascists didn't just vanish from society, and we still have to denounce those crimes. People still need reparations for what their families suffered. There's still mass graves being uncovered every year. So this is something that is a work in progress. Spain is a work in progress. Hopefully we'll get there eventually, but the civil war is not the main topic of conversation when it comes to funding or any other topic of conversation. Like, as the world has been affected severely by a pandemic. Now Europe is being affected by war, so not exactly on the table at the moment, but we'll get there eventually. How much of the book is fiction? A lot less than you might think. Most of the things I put on the book are true. I wanted it to be very close to fact as possible. I didn't want to make up stuff. If some of the things I made up is because I had no choice, because there was no link between the facts and the story I wanted to tell. I didn't want the book to be a history book. You have plenty of history books out there, but there's no many stories. So I wanted to tell a story, but based on fact. So you'll find that there's very, very little fiction in it. What other comments have you made or are making? My first published my first published story was a 2-page story that I co-wrote with a friend called David Abadia. My first published book was in Marvel. Like I said, it was a 2-page story that it was published in 2014, so a long time ago. And then I wrote another short story, and I also wrote that it's still been drawn. Is about one of the greatest writers in Spain called Quevedo. I'm not going to go into it now, but if you want to find about it, he's called Quevedo. He has a very fascinating story. He was a despicable character, but a great writer, and so I tell a story about his life. Next question: what other comics have? Did the fighting still continue even after Franco won? Some fight was still happening. There was some like rebels fighting, in small guerrilla warfare in the north. They were called the Maki, but that didn't last very long, sadly. How do you feel about what is happening in Ukraine? Well, you can imagine how I am feeling. Russia has no business in Ukraine, but I think I don't want to be controversial, but there is a lot in Ukraine that I think we're not telling. We're not being told. There's a lot of things going on in Ukraine, and we're not getting the full picture, I think. But I truly believe that Russia has no business in Ukraine. Putin should get the hell out of Ukraine and leave them in peace. Were you in the military? No, I never was in the military because when I was young, there was like mandatory military service in Spain that was phased out many years ago, but I couldn't do it, that mandatory military service, because of my eyesight. I was just too blind to do it. So they say, yeah, you're right, you don't have to do it. So no, I've never been in the military. What panel had the most impact on you and why? It would be very difficult to choose just a single panel out of the whole book, because so many bits out of it are really close to my heart. So but the last few pages are really connect with me, because even though the volunteers should have been treated as heroes when they went back to the US, that didn't happen. They were mistreated. They were looked up with suspicion out of being spies. Some of them couldn't even go and fight in World War II. Some of them were prosecuted because of being communist. One of them, who's in the book, he was jailed. If you ever heard of the Hollywood 12, there were a bunch of 12 Hollywood writers who were in prison because they were for being in the Communist Party during the witch hunt. So yeah, I think the last few pages really connect with me, and the last panel, obviously, with the fist and everything. Yeah, but I could not single out a single panel, I don't think. I think that's it. I think we're finished. Again, thank you very much for your time. Thank you very much. We're almost out of sunlight. But thank you very much for your time, and I hope I wasn't too boring. I hope you enjoyed it. And like I said, if you have any questions, in the description, I'll put my my profile link to Twitter, so reach out to me if you want to. Thank you, and have a great day. Bye bye.